The Nova's engine turned over on the third try, that familiar rumble filling the garage like an old friend saying hello. I'd replaced the starter motor myself last month, lying on my back on the cold concrete, my lower spine screaming the whole time. At 69, every repair takes twice as long as it used to, but I can't bring myself to pay someone else to do what I've always done with my own two hands. It was Thursday morning, 6 days since I'd sent that text to Derek. 6 days of silence. I backed the car out into the driveway, the October sunlight catching the fresh wax job I'd finished the night before. The Nova wasn't just transportation, it was the last piece of who I used to be. Patricia and I brought Derek home from the hospital in this car. I'd driven it to her funeral. Every dent, every replaced part, every hour I'd spent keeping it alive felt like proof that some things are worth fighting for, worth maintaining even when everyone else tells you to let go. Still babying that old beast, huh? I looked up to see Douglas leaning against his mailbox across the street, coffee mug in hand. He'd lived in the neighborhood since before Patricia died, watched Derek grow up alongside his own kids. Douglas had done well for himself, owned 3 Subway franchises across the county, always drove a new Lexus, always had opinions about how other people should live their lives. She runs better than most new cars, I said, closing the garage door. Heard Derek's been staying with Evan, Douglas said, his tone careful. Evan mentioned something about you two having a falling out. Evan was Derek's friend from high school, worked at one of Douglas's franchises. Of course, word had gotten around. In a suburb like ours, modest houses, long-established families, everyone knowing everyone's business, there were no secrets. We're working through something, I said. Douglas took a long sip of his coffee. You know, my Candace, she's 28 now, still lives at home. I don't charge her rent. Kids these days, the economy's tough. Sometimes they need help longer than we did. I felt the familiar pressure in my chest, the one that came whenever someone suggested I was being unreasonable. Derek's 32, Douglas. There's help, and then there's enabling. He's your only son, Don. Douglas shook his head slowly. Patricia would want you to... Don't. The word came out harder than I intended. Don't tell me what my wife would want. The air between us went cold. Douglas retreated into his house without another word, and I stood there in my driveway, hands shaking slightly, wondering if I was destroying every relationship I had left over this decision. Inside the house, I made coffee and oatmeal, the same breakfast I'd eaten for 40 years. The kitchen still had Patricia's touch, the rooster-printed curtains, the ceramic cookie jar shaped like an apple, the wall calendar from our church, Riverside Community Fellowship, where I'd been a member since 1981. I flipped the calendar to November, noticed the circled date for the annual Thanksgiving dinner. Last year, Derek had promised to come. He'd texted an hour before saying something came up. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart jumped. Maybe Derek finally, but no. It was Natasha, my daughter-in-law. Well, ex-daughter-in-law. She and Derek had divorced 4 years ago, but she still called me occasionally, usually around the holidays. Hi, Donald. Do you have a minute? Of course, Natasha. How are you? There was a pause. I heard about what happened. Derek called me. I closed my eyes. What did he tell you? That you cut him off completely, that you closed his bank account without warning. Donald, is that true? I sat down at the kitchen table, running my hand over the worn Formica surface. I gave him everything for 32 years, Natasha. He's never had to struggle, never had to make hard choices. I thought I was being a good father, but I was making him weak. He's scared, she said softly. He doesn't know how to manage money. You never taught him because you always just handled it for him. The truth of that hit me like a punch. She was right. I'd paid his bills, covered his rent, fixed his problems, all while thinking I was protecting him from the hardships I'd faced. But protection had become prison. He said some cruel things to me, I told her. About the car, about how I spend my money, like I owe him every dollar I have. He's been spoiled, Natasha admitted. That's part of why we didn't work out. He expected me to take care of him the way you always did. But Donald, going from everything to nothing overnight, that's harsh too. What should I have done? I don't know, but maybe you could have helped him transition, taught him instead of just cutting him loose. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the oatmeal going cold in front of me. Was I being righteous or just stubborn? Was this tough love or just cruelty dressed up in principle? The doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon. I opened it to find Shannon, a woman from church who volunteered with the food pantry committee. She held a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. "Donald, I hope I'm not intruding. I made extra chicken and rice. Thought you might like some." I knew what this was. The church network had gotten word. Poor Donald, all alone, fighting with his son. I should have been grateful, but instead I felt exposed. "That's kind of you, Shannon. You didn't have to." She handed me the dish, her eyes soft with concern. "We miss seeing you on Sundays. You haven't been to service in 3 weeks." I hadn't realized anyone was counting. I've been dealing with some things. Derek's situation, I know. "Donald, can I speak plainly?" I nodded, though I braced myself. I raised 3 boys on a teacher's salary after my husband left. I know what it's like to want to give them everything and not being able to, but I also know what happens when we give too much. They never learn to stand on their own. She touched my arm gently. "What you're doing, it's hard, but hard doesn't always mean wrong. Sometimes love looks like letting go." After she left, I stood in the doorway, holding that casserole, feeling something shift inside me. Not everyone thought I was a monster. Some people understood. That evening, I was in the garage again installing new brake pads on the Nova when I heard footsteps. I rolled out from under the car, expecting maybe Douglas coming to apologize or argue more. It was Derek. He looked terrible, unshaved, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in last week, dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I stood up slowly, my knees popping, wiping grease from my hands with an old rag. "I got evicted," he said finally. "Landlord wants 3 months back rent. I've been staying on Evan's couch." My instinct was to reach for my wallet, to fix it immediately. I felt my hand actually move toward my back pocket before I stopped myself. "I'm sorry that happened," I said carefully. "Sorry?" His voice cracked. "That's it? You're going to let me be homeless?" "You're not homeless. You have friends. You have options. I have nothing." The anger exploded out of him. "You took everything. That account, that money. I needed it. You needed to learn to earn it." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "Earn it? Like you did? Breaking your back for pennies? Driving a car older than most marriages? Living in this sad little time capsule?" He gestured around the garage at Patricia's gardening tools still hanging on the wall, at the workbench I'd built in 1985. "Is that what you want for me? Your pathetic life?" The words should have hurt. Maybe they did. But I looked at my son and saw something that hurt worse. I saw a stranger, a man I'd created by loving him the wrong way. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Out of my garage, out of my house. You want to call my life pathetic, you can do it somewhere else." Derek stared at me like I'd slapped him. Then he turned and walked away. And I heard his car, the one I'd co-signed for 3 years ago, the one I still made payments on when he came up short, peel out of the driveway. I stood there among my tools and my memories, and for the first time since Patricia died, I cried. Not quiet tears, but the kind that shake your whole body, the kind that come from a place so deep you didn't know it existed. I was doing the right thing. I knew I was. So why did it feel like I was losing everything? The next morning, Friday, I woke to find my truck's tires slashed, all 4 of them. The Nova in the garage was untouched, but someone had spray painted a single word across my garage door in red paint. Selfish. I stood there in my bathrobe, the morning cold biting through the fabric, staring at that word while my neighbor's curtains twitched, and I knew they were watching, judging, wondering what kind of father drives his own son to this. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Donald Patterson?" A woman's voice, professional. "Speaking. This is Whitney from County General Hospital. Your son Derek was brought in last night. He's asking for you." The hospital smell hit me before I made it through the automatic doors. That mix of antiseptic and floor wax and something underneath it all that smelled like fear. My work boots squeaked on the linoleum as I followed the blue line on the floor toward the emergency wing. County General was where they'd brought Patricia after her stroke, where I'd sat in a waiting room for 6 hours before a doctor with tired eyes told me she was gone. I hadn't been back since. "Derek Patterson," I told the nurse at the desk. My voice came out rougher than I intended. She checked her computer, her face carefully neutral, in that way hospital staff perfect when they've seen everything. "Room 247, he's stable. Down that hall, take a left. Stable." The word should have been comforting, but it just meant I didn't know what I was walking into. I found the room, pushed open the door. Derek was in the bed, his right arm in a cast, a bandage wrapped around his head, his face swollen on one side like he'd gone 3 rounds with someone twice his size. He looked small in that hospital bed, younger than 32, and for a second I saw him at 7 years old in this same hospital after he fell off his bike, how he'd reached for my hand and wouldn't let go. "Jesus, Derek!" I moved closer, my chest tight. "What happened?" He didn't look at me, just stared at the TV mounted on the wall, some morning show playing with the sound off. "Got jumped behind Evan's apartment complex. They wanted my wallet, my phone, took both." I pulled the visitor's chair close to the bed, sat down heavy. My knees ached from standing too long yesterday, from the brake job, from being 69 and carrying around all this weight. "Did you file a police report?" "Yeah, cops said they'd look into it." He finally turned his head toward me, and his eyes were different than I'd ever seen them. Not angry, broken. "They got me good, didn't they? You're going to be okay. Broken arm, some bruising. I'm not talking about this." He gestured weakly at his injuries. "I mean everything, my whole life. They took my phone, but there was nothing on it worth stealing. No money in my wallet, no job to call, no apartment to go back to, no..." His voice cracked. "Nothing." I opened my mouth, closed it. What could I say that wouldn't sound like "I told you so"? "I slashed your tires," Derek said, his words coming out flat. "And I painted that word on the garage. I was so angry I couldn't see straight. Thought if I hurt you like you hurt me, it would feel better." He swallowed hard. It didn't. My hands gripped the arms of the chair. Part of me wanted to yell, to tell him how I'd spent 2 hours scrubbing that paint off my garage door, how I'd had to call a tow truck for the pickup, shell out $400 for new tires. But I looked at him lying there, everything he had stolen in a parking lot by strangers, and I just felt tired. "Why'd you call me?" I asked. "After everything." "Because you're all I have left." The words came out like they hurt. "Natasha won't take me back. My friends are tired of me. Evan told me I could stay 1 more week, then I'm out. The hospital called you because you're my emergency contact, and when they asked if there was anyone else, I couldn't think of a single person." We sat in silence. A nurse came in, checked Derek's vitals, adjusted his IV, left without saying much. The morning show switched to commercial, car dealerships, injury lawyers, a mattress store promising a Veterans Day sale. "You were right," Derek said finally. "You know, what you said about me not knowing the weight of a dollar? I've never paid rent on time, never worried about utilities getting shut off, never had to choose between fixing my car and eating. You always just fixed it." He looked at me, really looked at me. "And I hated you for stopping. I wasn't trying to hurt you." "I know, I didn't know it then, but I know it now." He shifted in the bed, winced. "Lying in that parking lot last night, bleeding, watching some kid run off with my phone, I kept thinking about what you said, about learning to stand on my own, and I realized I can't stand because I never learned how." Something in my chest loosened, just a fraction. "When your mom died, I started, then had to stop, gather myself. When Patricia died, you were 12 years old. You cried yourself to sleep for 6 months. I'd hear you through the wall, these quiet sobs like you were trying not to bother me. And I thought, I swore, I'd make sure you never hurt like that again. I'd give you everything she couldn't anymore." I rubbed my face, felt the stubble rough against my palms. "But somewhere along the way, giving you everything turned into teaching you nothing. I called you pathetic." Derek's voice was barely above a whisper. "Your life, I called it pathetic. I know. I didn't mean it. I was just angry, scared, I know." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "That Nova you think is a waste of money? I bought it the year you were born with my first real paycheck from the construction company. Your mom and I, we drove to Kentucky in that car for our anniversary. Stopped at every small-town diner we could find. She got food poisoning from bad shrimp in Lexington. Spent the whole night in a motel bathroom while I held her hair back. We laughed about it for years." I felt my throat tighten. "That car's not just metal and parts to me, son. It's everything I have left of the man I was when she was alive." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Dad." I couldn't remember the last time he'd called me Dad instead of just expecting me to answer when he needed something. "I'm sorry too," I said. "I should have taught you better. Should have made you earn things, learn things, struggle a little so you'd know you could survive it. I failed you by protecting you too much." "What do I do now?" The question came out small, helpless. I don't know, but we'll figure it out. Together, different than before. I met his eyes. No more handouts, but I'll help you learn how to budget, how to job hunt properly, how to stand on your own feet so when life knocks you down, and it will, you know how to get back up. Derek nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes with his good hand. A doctor came in then, young guy who looked too tired for 9 in the morning. He checked Derek's chart, asked some questions, said they'd discharge him tomorrow if everything looked good. After he left, I sat there with my son in the quiet hum of hospital machinery and realized we were starting over. Not from scratch, we had too much history for that, but from honest ground. Where am I supposed to go when they let me out? Derek asked. I thought about my house. The empty bedroom that used to be his, that I'd turned into storage over the years, the couch in the living room, the rules I'd need to set, the boundaries I'd need to keep. You can stay with me, temporarily, but we do this my way. You get a job, any job, I don't care if it's flipping burgers or stocking shelves. You pay me rent, even if it's just $100 a month. You save money, and you work toward getting your own place. Okay. No argument, no negotiation, just acceptance. And you help me around the house, yard work, repairs, things I'm getting too old to do alone. I don't know how to do most of that stuff. Then you'll learn. That's the point. He was quiet for a moment. Why are you helping me after everything I did? I thought about Patricia, about the promises I'd made at her funeral, about the difference between keeping promises and keeping someone from growing up. I thought about Shannon from church, about Natasha's words on the phone, about lying under the Nova last night wondering if I'd destroyed my relationship with my son permanently for the sake of principle. Because you're my son, I said simply. And because love isn't just giving you what you want. Sometimes it's giving you what you need, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Derek was released the next afternoon. I drove him to my house in the Nova. His car had been impounded for unpaid parking tickets, another problem we'd have to solve later. He sat in the passenger seat where Patricia used to sit, looking out the window at the familiar streets of our suburb like he was seeing them for the first time. At home, I showed him the bedroom I'd cleared out that morning. Single bed, dresser, nothing fancy. It's yours for now, but Derek, I mean what I said. This isn't like before. I know. That first week was awkward. Derek spent most of it applying for jobs online on my old desktop computer, his broken arm making everything take twice as long. I taught him how to write a resume that didn't sound desperate, how to follow up without being annoying. He got 3 interviews, no offers. The 4th interview was at a hardware store in the next town over, part-time, minimum wage, stock and customer service. They called him the next day. He got it. I was in the garage working on the Nova's carburetor when he told me. He stood in the doorway, something different in his posture. Pride, maybe, or just relief. $11 an hour, he said. 25 hours a week to start. It's not much. It's a start. I wiped my hands on a rag. When do you begin? Monday. They're giving me a shirt and everything. I wanted to hug him, but we weren't there yet, so I just nodded. Good. You'll do fine. That Sunday, I went back to church for the first time in a month. Derek came with me. We sat in the back pew, and when Pastor Gregory asked if anyone had Thanksgivings to share, Derek stood up, cast still on his arm, bruises fading to yellow on his face, and said, "I'm thankful for second chances." The congregation didn't know the whole story, didn't need to, but Shannon caught my eye from 3 rows ahead and smiled, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, like maybe I was doing something right. Thanksgiving came. Derek had been at the hardware store for 3 weeks, saved up $270, paid me $100 for rent like we'd agreed. He was learning to budget, tracking every dollar in a notebook I'd given him. On Thanksgiving morning, we worked together in the kitchen, me showing him how to prep the turkey the way Patricia used to, him asking questions, actually listening to the answers. We ate dinner at 2 o'clock, just the 2 of us at the kitchen table. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole from Shannon, who'd dropped it off that morning. Derek said grace, halting, unsure, but sincere. Thank you for this food and for Dad not giving up on me even when I deserved it. Amen. Amen, I echoed. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Derek said, I've been saving up for the tires, the ones I slashed. I want to pay you back. You don't have to. I do. It'll take me a while, but I want to. And the paint on the garage, I'll repaint it myself when spring comes. I already asked Kyle at work. He used to do house painting, said he'd teach me. I set down my fork, looked at my son across the table. 32 years old, finally growing into the man I'd always hoped he'd become. Your mom would be proud of you, I said. His eyes got wet. You think so? I know so. After dinner, we went out to the garage. I showed him how to check the Nova's oil, how to read the dipstick, what to listen for in the engine. His broken arm was out of the cast now, still weak but healing. He asked questions about the car, about the repairs I'd done, and I realized this was the first time he'd ever shown real interest in anything I cared about. Think you'd teach me? He asked. How to work on cars. You want to learn? Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to have my own place someday, I should know how to take care of things, and maybe... He ran his hand along the Nova's fender. Maybe I judged this too quick. It's actually pretty cool. I handed him a wrench. Start with changing the oil. I'll walk you through it. We worked until dark, my son and I, our hands getting dirty together for the first time in his life. I showed him where to place the drain pan, how to find the oil filter, the right way to tighten everything back up. He made mistakes, but he learned from them. And when we finally got everything right, when the fresh oil was in and the engine purred clean, I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Competence, self-reliance, the beginning of dignity. That night, after Derek had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of coffee, looking at the picture of Patricia on the mantel. She was smiling in it, the way she smiled at our wedding, full of hope and trust that everything would work out. I think I finally got it right, I told her picture. Took me long enough. The house was quiet, except for the old furnace kicking on, that familiar rattle I'd been meaning to fix for years. Outside, the Nova sat in the garage, waiting for the next repair, the next drive, the next memory. And upstairs, my son slept in his childhood home, no longer a child, finally learning what it meant to be a man. I'd lost time, I'd made mistakes, I'd hurt him trying to help him, then had to hurt him more to save him. But sitting there in the lamplight, Patricia smiling down at me from frozen time, I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes the hardest thing love asks of us is to let go of who we wish someone could be and help them become who they need to be. Even if it breaks your heart in the process, even if it costs you everything you thought love was supposed to look like. I finished my coffee, turned off the lamp, and went to bed knowing that tomorrow Derek would wake up, go to work, come home, and we'd have dinner together. Small things, normal things. The kind of things I'd tried to give him for 32 years without realizing the gift wasn't in the giving. It was in teaching him he didn't need me to give it. He needed to know he could earn it himself. And now finally he was learning. Outside my window, the November wind moved through bare branches, and somewhere in the distance, a train whistle called out to the night. I closed my eyes and felt Patricia beside me the way I always did in the quiet moments. Felt her hand in mine, heard her voice saying what she'd always said when things got hard. You're doing good, Don. Keep going. So I would, for Derek, for Patricia, for the man I'd been and the man I was still trying to be. I would keep going.